Hello again, everyone. So, my friends, in the last lesson, we talked about the different features for fonts and generally how to manipulate text. So, in this lesson, we're going to examine and correct some mistakes that we probably made while writing our code. So, that means we're going to talk about debugging in CSS. Now, naturally, it is an important issue for us because we can sit here and write very long code while preparing web pages. And because we're human, I hope, we can make mistakes. So if we don't necessarily know how to go back and analyze our code correctly, trying to debug these errors can be overwhelming. So I want to show you how to prevent this. We're going to open the font page that we prepared in the last lesson, and we're going to make some mistakes there and then learn how to debug these errors. All right, so in that last lesson, we've got a few different font and text features, as you can see here, and going to the HTML file, and let's assume that I've made some mistakes where I specify the CSS file name. So let's just delete a letter from here, for example, and now let's take a look at what's going on. Okay, so see, sure enough, we can see that all the CSS features are gone. So how can we fix this error without just, getting lost in the code? Of course, there would be several ways to do this. We're going to start with our first method. I like to start at the beginning. Now, usually I'll use Chrome for my browser. Maybe you prefer different browsers, but that's your choice. But I'll just go to the front page and open that in the browser. So here, I'll press the 3 points under the closure area on the far right in the upper right side. So I click on the customizing page of Chrome, and here, see how I'm hovering over the More Tools tab, and I can choose the Developer Tools option. And in the console section that opens, it's just stated right here what the mistakes are in red. So it tells us that there is no CSS file with this name. So how do we fix our mistake? Well, we got to go back to our HTML file. So we will look at the CSS file name and compare it with the name in the link tag. And we'll just rewrite the letter that we deleted. And what do you know? That's how we correct mistakes. So let's refresh our page. And the CSS features are back. All right. So when we look over here at the console, we see that it's empty because we fixed our mistakes and there are no more problems. So if we just look at a few more things on DevTools, you see how there's a sources section just to the right of the console. Looking at this section, we can see files prepared for this web page and where they are. So when we click on the files, we can see our code. And when we look at the element section on the far left, there are HTML codes and CSS codes written for that element to the right. When we hover over each element here, it shows the area of that element on the page. So I want to talk to you a little bit about a situation that might cause a different error. All right, so we know that we can prepare CSS code in 3 different ways. These are inline CSS, which we prepared using the style attribute, internal CSS, which we prepared using the style tag, and external CSS, where we prepared an external CSS file. All right, so let's say that we use these 3 methods for a tag. Which will be the priority and which will override the others? So I'll go to the HTML file and I'm going to make some changes so that I can see this. And I'll specify the background color to be green with style attribute in the body tag. And then I'm going to write blue for the background of the body part using the style tag in the header section. Then finally, I'll go to our CSS file and make the background color yellow for the body tag. So I'm going to save the changes and refresh the page in the browser. Now I want to show you how we can open the developer tools in a different way. So I'll right-click on our page and press Inspect. We can do that by pressing Control-Shift-I, or if you're on Mac, Command-Option-I. Now, I usually right-click and say Inspect. I like it because it's easier. But if we look at our page, the background is green. We change the background to green in inline CSS. So here, the priority is inline CSS. So inline CSS is used by default. But here I can select the body tag in the elements section and look what's happening in the style section. And what you see is the priority is inline CSS. So let's have a look at internal CSS and the style tag. Remember, we wrote that in the HTML file. And finally, the external CSS that we prepared with the CSS file. And of course, there is a place here to choose from. So if we want to, we can choose one of them to check the changes that we made. So, for example, let's choose the second option to see if the background is blue. And we can see how it looks like when it's yellow. However, the changes that we make here do not reflect the changes in the HTML or CSS file. So when we refresh our page, everything reverts to the way it was before. So now I'll go to the HTML file and delete the code inside the body tag, and the background is blue, just as we expected. So now the priority is internal CSS, right? Background is yellow when we delete this part too. And that's that. So sure enough, my friends, in this lesson, we talked about the debugging issues in CSS, and that provides an easy way to check while we prepare our pages. And I mentioned the priority ranking of CSS, right? So for now, it's goodbye, and I'll see you in the next lesson.